Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And by the way, let me say this once again. Last week I shared with you the crisis that we're currently going through because I'm losing my office space here. Boy, I have been in the process of packing books. And the room right here to my immediate south, I have a stack of binders, folders that I'm just literally throwing away. I've just got to get rid of stuff, and I hate to throw them away. There's some of the great big plastic, hard plastic folders and what have you. I've even put them on Facebook, hoping somebody could use them at no charge. Just get rid of them, but. Anyway, it hasn't happened. But I mean, I've got boxes and boxes and boxes of my books stacked up, waiting to be taken to storage, and it's just a mess. But all of that aside, and that is the fact, I want to say again how much I appreciate the fact that some of you have committed to supporting our ministry on a monthly way, and as well as those of you who have given a one-time contribution. This is so much of a help, and I just cannot go again without expressing my profound appreciation for your help. It means so very much to us. Extremely helpful at this time. Okay, I've been developing with you the correlation between Daniel 12, Matthew 25:31, Revelation chapter 11. And I've been spending some good time on Daniel chapter 12. And the reason for that being, Daniel 12 predicted the resurrection. Matthew 25:31 predicted resurrection. Revelation 11 predicted resurrection. So, unless a person is willing and able to demonstrate, all three texts are talking about a different time, which, just doesn't work. You're going to say we got three different resurrections? At three different end of the ages, it just really doesn't work. And so I've been spending time over the last couple of videos, several videos now, demonstrating that Daniel chapter 12, all of it, is a united discourse about the time of Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following, as well as being parallel to Revelation chapter 11. Now, while virtually everyone agrees that all three texts speak of resurrection, there are major efforts that are made to go to Daniel chapter 12, as I've shared with you, and to say, okay, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, at that time there shall be tribulation such as has never been since there was a nation up to that time. And we are told that's the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. But Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 is supposedly the end of time resurrection. And then we come to Daniel chapter 12 and verse 3. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament. Those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. And guess what we find? We find men such as I mentioned to you before, and as I did a review of his book, Mr. Kyle Pope, thinking about AD 70. Well, on page 85, he tells us that Daniel chapter 12, verse 3, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, those who turn many to righteous, like the stars forever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book until the time of the end. Well, guess what? We're told that the time of the end here is not the time of the end of the resurrection of verse 2. And it's not the time of the end of chapter 10 and 11. So what is the end of verse 4, according to Mr. Pope? It's the end of Daniel's life. Well, what that demands, ladies and gentlemen, is that you've got to place Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 at one of two different places. Number one, in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, which is precisely what Mr. Pope does on page 85 and following. He says, and he goes back into chapter 11 and talks about the wise being righteous and shining, etc. And that's in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. So here's what we have. According to Mr. Pope, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, time of Antiochus Epiphanes, Great Tribulation. Well, I've already debunked that. That is simply historically inaccurate. Just go back yesterday to yesterday's video for that information. So Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 is the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 is the end of time. Now Daniel chapter 12, verse 3, when the righteous would shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteous like the stars forever. Oh, that takes us back to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Ladies and gentlemen, what a mishmash. I mean, talk about hopscotch exegesis. Verse 1, Antiochus. Verse 2, end of time. Verse 3, Antiochus again. Oh, and then verse 4, the end of Daniel's life. Here, there, and everywhere. Mr. Pope and those like him take Jehoiakim's penknife, as it were, and they just go to slashing in the text, and they see no harmony, they see no unity, they see no united narrative. It's just this here, this there, here's this, and here's that. Let me notice something here. Verse 2. There shall be a resurrection. Those who sleep in the dust shall rise. Some to everlasting life, some to everlasting condemnation. Now, don't forget, I cited for you yesterday, and I already put that up. I cited for you the quote from Sam Frost's book, Essays on the Resurrection, in which he takes note of the grammar. The connective particle that begins verse 2 that connects it with verse 1. Well, he's absolutely correct on that. But that means that verse 2 is connected to verse 1. Therefore, if you put verse 1 at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, you must put verse 2 in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Well, that won't work for the futurist. So they all of a sudden start ignoring the grammar that they once applied and once honored, and they say, once again, they insert a so-called so far 2,500-year gap in the period at the end of verse 1. But wait a minute. Verse 3, those who are wise shall shine. Well, who are these? Well, the wise are the just who are resurrected. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament. And again, Mr. Pope applies that to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Oh, but wait a minute. Our Lord had something to say about that. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus told the first of his many, many parables. And in Matthew chapter 13, he told the parable of the wheat and the tares, and the devil sowing the seed, or sowing the tares, I should say. Now, let me read to you verse 36 and following to set the entire context. Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. And he answered and said to them, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are those of the wicked one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Now watch this. The harvest is the resurrection at the end of the age. Mr. Pope agrees with that. Various other commentators agree with that. Most commentators agree with that, as a matter of fact. And yet, again, Mr. Pope applies verse 3 to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. So, Mr. Pope has two ends in Daniel chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. Two ends. The time of the end of Antiochus Epiphanes, we don't really know what came to an end at that particular time, but it's got to be a time of the end. And then we have the end of time, according to Mr. Pope. Well, remember now, Mr. Pope is saying verse 3 is the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. But let me continue. The harvest is the end of the age, the reapers are the angels. So Jesus is applying the time of the resurrection, i.e. the end of the age, of Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. Okay, great, because that's true. But wait, therefore as the tares are gathered, burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels. They will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let the one who has ears to hear, let him hear. Wait a minute. This is Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. So what does that mean? It means that Jesus applied Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 to the end of the age resurrection. But it also means that Jesus applied Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 to the end of the age resurrection. Not as Mr. Pope argues in his book, not to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. So unless Jesus was wrong in his application of Daniel chapter 12, verse 3 to the end of the age harvest, i.e. the end of the age resurrection, then Mr. Pope is simply wrong. But then, verse 4, what does Mr. Pope do? He goes and he tells us, you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And all of a sudden, Mr. Pope says, shutting up the words and sealing the book, that could not have been done by Daniel until the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. And I'm going, when I read that, I had to go back and I had to read it, several times. I just couldn't quite figure out what he was trying to say until I figured it out. Okay, you, Daniel, shut up the word, seal the book until the time of the end. What end is addressed here? Is this the end of things just prophesied? If so, how could Daniel seal the book until that time? Daniel would not live until the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, or for that matter, until the Roman period, or the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem. Who said that Daniel had to live until this end? Verse 13 of Daniel chapter 12 emphatically tells us, Daniel, go your way, for you will sleep with your fathers until the time of the end. It's the book, it's the prophecy, it's the vision that was to be sealed. It wasn't Daniel living until that time. You see, as I've used the term before, that's a shell game. And so, again, Daniel would not live until the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, it is possible that Daniel is being told to seal it up in the fact that it will not be completely understood until it happens. But if so, it is still not something that you, Daniel, could actually accomplish. Why? If Daniel put a seal on the vision so that it would not be understood until the time of the end, that doesn't mean that Daniel had to live until the time of the end. It means just exactly what Jesus said when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Well, Daniel chapter 12. Predicted what? Oh, the abomination of desolation. So, Jesus, speaking to his first century apostles, said, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, let the one who reads understand. What did Jesus say? What did Daniel say in Daniel chapter 12? Many shall run to and fro at what? At the time of the end, and knowledge shall be increased. Jesus said, when you see the abomination, then understand. So Daniel's talking about the time of the end when the knowledge of what he is sealing up would be increased. And Jesus said when his apostles would see what Daniel foretold, their knowledge would be increased. But that means that Daniel wasn't talking about the end of his life. He was talking about the time of the end of the abomination, or in which the abomination of desolation would appear, which was Jesus' generation. And thus the attempt to dichotomize, to divide, to delineate, and to destroy the unity of the narrative of Daniel chapter 12 is completely falsified. And what does that mean? Well, it means that since Jesus applied the time of the resurrection, applying Daniel chapter 12, but he also applied the time of the end when the righteous would shine forth as the sun to the same identical time, then it means that Mr. Pope's attempt to divide between Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, time of the end, and the time of Antiochus Epiphanes as the time of the end is completely falsified. Ladies and gentlemen, it amazes me, and again, I want to be kind, but it amazes me at the absolute, utter desperation of commentators to avoid the force of when Daniel said his prophecy would be fulfilled, which is emphatic, graphic, and explicit, as we shall see as we continue. In the meantime, I'm out of time. Hey, listen, go to my website, get a copy of my book, The Resurrection of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future. Send me a note that says you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, saving you $5. Okay, don't forget, tomorrow we continue our discussion of why N.T. Wright is wrong on the redemption of creation as we continue our examination of Isaiah chapter 65. I'll see you on the flip side.